Well, hello and welcome to CBN News live coverage of Super Tuesday. My name is Dan Andros. I'm managing editor for CBN News. Joined today by CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody. You're looking right now at a live shot of Trump headquarters. And David, it's projected that we only have a couple states in here. Virginia, North Carolina have been projected for Trump. Not a surprise there, but it's just the first couple of states here as we expect more to come rolling in soon as polls are just closing across the country here on Super Tuesday, where you have a whole bunch of states, a whole slew of them. So there is a lot to talk through here, David.
Well, there sure is. First of all, let's start with North Carolina. No surprise there. Donald Trump winning handily. Virginia, Donald Trump winning in Virginia. Not a surprise at all as well. Having said that, the Virginia electorate a little bit more moderate on the Republican side than, let's say, North Carolina. But it doesn't matter. I mean, with Trump, as we've seen in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and South Carolina, and just down the line it goes. It's just been everywhere. Michigan just goes on and on. He's winning everywhere. So whether the electorate is a little bit more moderate, which you think would be good for Nikki Haley, it still doesn't matter. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party. He's owning it tonight. We have more polls that states that have just closed. And I can tell you at 8 o'clock, it's, look, as I get older, I've got to read it because I don't know. My memory's barely functioning. Alabama, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and most of Texas, all closing now at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we should, any moment now, get calls from the Associated Press that Trump will win Alabama, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and down the line. So we're waiting on Vermont. Vermont closed at 7 p.m. That was Nikki Haley's really best shot to win a state tonight. And Dan, you can tell me the latest on the numbers, but I believe Donald Trump's winning there as well. It's close. What is it? I can't see. I've got to put on my old.
Yeah, we're watching. Yeah, I know. That's the small font. That's for.
I hate the small font.
That's for the eagle-eyed in the bunch here. But looking at it now, there's about 15, according to AP numbers, which we're following, 15.8% of the votes counted. So still a ways to go. But right now, Trump's up 6%. And like you said, David, this was one of those states, last time we talked, it was kind of like, what's the path for Nikki Haley here? And so, she was, obviously, we're only a few days away from the last primary up until Super Tuesday. So maybe the thinking was, hey, we've come this far. Let's just see what we can do on Super Tuesday. But she did travel around. She went to a few states. She went to, Vermont was one of them. And so Virginia was one, which, of course, didn't go her way. But that is one where she's getting at least a little bit of traction and making it close.
Well, and let's be clear. I think you can sum up Nikki Haley's campaign at this point by looking at the one place she did win, Washington, D.C. That pretty much sums it up. The deep state primary, if you will. A lot of moderate, left-leaning, even Republicans in Washington, D.C. And then Nikki Haley puts out on social media, "Thank you, Washington, D.C." Really? That's the one place you probably don't want to win as a Republican. And she did win.
That's funny. Well, Dave, you mentioned that. I'm looking at the delegate count right now, and the ones that are official so far. Obviously, we have a whole bunch that haven't been declared just yet on the AP results, but 273 for Trump, 43 for Haley. And you're scrolling down the list, and you're like, okay, where's she getting them from? And she's got a few, but then the one Trump doesn't have any in is DC. He's got a 0, and that's Haley's best with 19. I just thought that was a little bit ironic, and maybe on brand, I guess, for what we're seeing play out.
And let me give you a little bit of kind of an overview of what we're going to see tonight. So as you mentioned, Dan, Donald Trump with 273 delegates going into the night. Tonight on Super Tuesday, about a third of states, 15 states, voting. So about a third of the United States voting. 854 Republican delegates up for grabs tonight. So even if Donald Trump won all 854, he's not going to win all 854. He'll probably win very close to that, but not all of them. Even if he won all of them, quick math, 854 plus 273, around 1,100, 1,120, whatever it is, you need 1,215 to secure the nomination. So he will not get there tonight. He'll probably end up being 100, 150 delegates short of that, maybe less. And then the clincher will come next week March 12th, when Georgia votes, Mississippi votes, Washington State votes. That should put them over the top. That's what the Trump campaign is expecting on March 12th. If for some reason it doesn't happen then, Dan, it'll happen March 19th. The following week, that's when Florida, other states as well, but Florida and Arizona are the big ones on March 19th. And then for sure, it'll be a done deal. And that'll be the end. And Dan, it's interesting to point out that Nikki Haley, we understand, will not be speaking tonight. Normally, obviously, we would hear from her on these evenings, not tonight. And I think that says everything you need to know. She doesn't have any public events planned after tonight. And so, look, I'm not a rocket scientist, but let's put it all together. She's not speaking tonight. No public events planned after Super Tuesday. She's even said she's going through until Super Tuesday, and then we'll evaluate. She's clearly going to see what the results are tonight across 15 states and then make that decision. But I think that decision is pretty much already made. This will be the end of the road tonight for Nikki Haley.
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of time of when does she indeed make it official. Apparently that won't be tonight, like you said. Not announced they're not speaking. Former President Trump will presumably be speaking. He always enjoys these sorts of chances to address, and why wouldn't you on a big Super Tuesday, right, where you're projected to win most of these states? Of course you're going to get up there and speak, because now it's probably time to really turn towards the general. And once this is put to rest, any potential chance, any outside long shot turnaround out of nowhere from Haley, once that's put to rest, we've got to turn this thing into the general. And we're already starting to see Biden do that a little bit on this border issue that surged. What's Trump's next steps from here?
Well, it's all Biden all the time. And I think the key for him, I'm talking about for Donald Trump, is to compare his presidency to Joe Biden's presidency. That's a big advantage for Donald Trump. Remember, in 2020, he couldn't do that. He was running as president. Biden wasn't president, obviously, yet. There wasn't that juxtaposition. There is now. And I think that's a big deal, especially if you look inside the exit polling tonight. You see, once again, that people were better off. They felt better off under a Donald Trump presidency than a Joe Biden presidency. That's the apples to apples comparison. It gives Trump a huge advantage going into the general. Another interesting part of the exit polls that, this is the geek out portion of the YouTube broadcast where I kind of deep dive into the polls. But I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, once again, to figure out what the number one issue was tonight. Just look at the exit polls. It's not the economy. It's not the economy. It's immigration. In Virginia, it was immigration. In North Carolina, it was immigration. They're only doing exit polls, by the way, we should point out, in Virginia, North Carolina, and California as well. It's immigration across the board. The economy, number two. So if immigration is the number one issue, especially among Republican voters in terms of the enthusiasm, that's great news for Donald Trump. So one other exit poll geek out moment here, and this is interesting. In Virginia, listen to this statistic, Dan. This is an exit poll statistic. In Virginia, voters, these are Republican voters, asked, would Trump be fit for the presidency if convicted? If he was convicted, would he be fit for the presidency? 53% of folks in Virginia, Republicans, said yes. A majority said yes, even if convicted. The number even higher in North Carolina, 64% of Republicans said yes, even if he was convicted. So this is the power of Trump. I mean, this is the old, I could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue. I mean, the Teflon Don, as they call him. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing that play out in these exit polls here, Dan. Yeah,
we sure are. And I just want to give a mention to everyone who's joining us on YouTube. Welcome everyone on the CBN News Channel as well. If you want to comment, if you want to get questions in for David, feel free to shoot them into the chat there on YouTube. We're monitoring that. We see some people from Florida, from New Jersey checking in, Wisconsin. We got people from everywhere, Georgia. So appreciate you all being here, but feel free to leave your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them during the broadcast here. So, all right, David, with presumably Nikki Haley likely ending this thing, if not tonight, in the next 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
The question that's kind of getting floated around in the media is, all right, so what happens to these Haley voters? Because clearly Trump was on a dominating path here, but she still got a chunk of the vote. And then usually it's kind of labeled as a more moderate vote. Like we're saying, we're seeing her do well or a little better than her other states in Vermont. So the question looming now is, well, what happens to those voters? What do they do come general election times? Trump's very strong here in the primaries, but he's going to need those moderate votes to win the general and to beat Joe Biden. So what's your response to that line of questioning that the media has been bringing up?
Well, let me go with facts, Dan. Remember, as we tell you here all the time at CBN News, truth matters because the truth matters. And this is why we are on YouTube and why we're providing analysis. And it's not just analysis based on, hey, what do you think? What's my opinion? Who cares about what my opinion is? Let's go to the facts. And the facts are simply this. The media is spinning this as Nikki Haley's 40% support, and how in the world is Donald Trump going to win that 40% support? But the problem here is that number, 40%, not accurate, because if you go specifically inside the numbers, that is not 40% Republican support that she's winning. Most of it is Democrat and independent support. So, for example, you want facts? We will give you facts. Dan, not that you're asking for facts, but I'm just talking to, I don't know, like imaginary people, I guess. But look, here's the deal. In North Carolina tonight, Nikki Haley, in terms of the support that she won, these are her supporters, only 18% of her supporters were Republican. In Virginia, it was about 23%. So this idea that it's 40% is not true. Truth matters. So now you're at a much lower number, 23%, 18%, and then it becomes a crapshoot. At that point, the Republicans, the Trump campaign, but even the RNC believe that most of those will come back home, as they like to say. It's the hold your nose crowd, and you'll get the bulk, 5, 10, 12%, whatever it is, of those voters that will eventually just go ahead and say, you know what? All right, I'll vote for Trump even over Biden. And then there's a few percentages, obviously, that are not going to do that. And so is it a concern that the Trump campaign needs to be worried about? Sure, but not to the degree that the legacy media is talking about. And I think it's important to put that in a proper perspective, Dan.
All right, just looking in the chat here, Margie's asking us to check in on the Texas races. What's going on there? I can tell you the numbers, at least for the GOP primary voting so far. It's just 15% are in so far, so a long way to go still. Trump commanding lead in Texas, 74-20 so far. So clearly that one's going to be a big win for Trump. As far as, I don't know if you have your eye on any of the other races going on, if there's anything else in Texas that stands out. But I want to mention real quick, David, you could chime in on the numbers in a second, but I did want to mention the immigration issue. You said it went to the top. And by the way, we're waiting for President Trump to speak, former President Trump to speak, and we will take you to that when he hits the stage. So we're on the lookout for that. Don't worry about that. But you mentioned the immigration thing being a top topic, and that is very interesting because I've been covering presidential elections for some time now, and I don't recall immigration ever being the number one issue. It's been a high issue before, but I don't remember it zooming to the top like this before. So that's different. And we just saw some reporting now in the past few days that Haiti had this massive prison break. They've been struggling with gang control and all sorts of chaos in Haiti. Now, why do I bring that up? Well, if that continues, you are going to see a massive surge of migrants heading out of Haiti, doing whatever they can to get out of Haiti. Because, I've been to Haiti before and I've done some reporting there. And when you get out, especially into, I don't know, just towns that are not like the main city, but even Port-au-Prince is kind of chaotic at times. But it's like the Wild West out there. And I was there when it was fairly stable, like 5 years ago. It didn't have this sort of complete chaos that it has right now. So you better believe people are going to be fleeing there. And so that's just going to exacerbate what's going on at the southern border even more.
You're right, Dan. And here's the problem for Biden. It's not going to get better before it gets worse. And you're mentioning Haiti, and you just go down the list. It's going to be relatively disastrous for the Biden administration going forward on immigration. And look, you say that you've never seen these type of numbers before in terms of exit polling on immigration. Well, right, because the border is the worst it's ever been. The Donald Trump campaign on immigration in 2016, it was really bad. It's even worse now. And so I think what you're going to see, and I know we're going to have some coverage of State of the Union on Thursday, so we'll talk more about this at that point. But Joe Biden is going to start to bring up this idea that, he wants to have this deal, this bipartisan deal that's going to somehow clamp down on border security. I mean, listen, truth matters. I mean, the devil is in the details. Real quick, hang on one second. Stand by. I'm just getting some breaking news here. Okay, that was a Trump campaign source. I can't name that source. They're thinking that Donald Trump is going to probably speak around 10 p.m. Eastern tonight. However, this person's saying it could be earlier. I guess that was just for my planning purposes. Whoops, I said it on the air. My bad. Listen, it's not the end of the world. Anyhow, the point is he'll probably speak around 10 o'clock Eastern, maybe before. Anyhow, the point.
I'm not sure if we're going to make it that long, but we'll try.
Yes. Okay. So there you go. We've got some information once again coming in from the Trump campaign. But anyhow, I don't even know where I was. The point is, it was immigration. It's a problem. It's going to get worse for Biden. Let me just say one other thing. And this has to do with the economy, which is the number 2 issue. They always talk about Bidenomics and they talk about the economy. By the way, on Bidenomics, someone needs to explain to me how in the world you can have a catchphrase for something that people aren't buying at all from an economic standpoint. It doesn't make any sense. But anyhow, you compare Bidenomics to Reaganomics. Reaganomics saw the GDP grow gangbusters, 7.1%. The GDP under Biden, not the same. So it's totally apples and oranges. And what's another important point to remember, because the Democrats will say, well, Barack Obama had tough poll numbers in 2012 against Mitt Romney or so. Yeah, but at that point, the economy was turning around. It was getting better. There was a lot more optimism coming at that point. Things had begun to turn around already. With Biden, things haven't really turned around at all. And once again, to be clear, just to be clear with Joe Biden here, they can talk all they want about the economy doing gangbusters, but folks are not feeling it out there. They just aren't. And let's also be clear, Gavin Newsom the other day said there were 15 million jobs created by the Biden administration. Well, once again, back to what CBN News always says, the truth matters. 15 million jobs, hold on for a second, 72% of those jobs were jobs that were not created, they just came back from COVID. So, remember, this was coming out of COVID. So 72% of those 15 million that we keep hearing about, they were already there. They just came back because of COVID. So it's important to put a lot of this in perspective. And that's what we try to do here at CBN News.
Yeah, well done. I just wanted to update a couple people here on the chat. We got Linda asking for an update on Oklahoma. It's early going. Again, some of these polls just closed. So Oklahoma, we've got 5.5% of the votes counted. So just in the early going, but the indication is there. 77% of those are going to former President Trump. Dave, we got a question for you from Holly, who was asking, this is kind of a forward-looking one because this is interesting. Regardless, I guess, if Trump wins or not in November, is who will the Republican candidate be in 2028? Can you see that far ahead?
Hold on, let me get my Christian crystal ball. Wait, you can't have a Christian crystal ball. Let me just be very clear. So don't get your crystal balls out. As a matter of fact, throw them away now that I think about it. Well, that's an interesting scenario. Let me just say this. This is what I think is going on in the minds of Nikki Haley and Mike Pence. Okay. Mike Pence started a $20 million organization. He's in the process of starting a $20 million organization to fight back against populist policies that Trump is supporting right now within the Republican Party. He wants to bring it back to Reagan days. He wants to go old school, if you will. Nikki Haley feels the same way. I believe what they're hoping for, and by the way, let me do the disclaimer, good luck with this, is that they want to see a 2028 that has Trump long gone and off the stage at that point. And then, how do I say this? Things return to regular order, as they like to say in the Senate, and it goes back to what the Republican Party used to stand for. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't see that happening. I think the train has left the station, not just with Trump. I think it started with the Tea Party, and then it morphed even more after Trump. And I think those days are long gone. Now, having said that, we know from a historical perspective, the Republican Party has changed throughout the years. So there's been different. What's the word I'm looking for? Different variations. Thank you. Variations. Sorry, if it's more than a 2-syllable word, I'm done. Variations of that throughout history. So I think that's what Nikki Haley and Mike Pence are banking on, and you might see a return with them in 2028. Having said that, I don't think that's happening. I think the wave of the future is folks like Vivek Ramaswamy, J.D. Vance, those type of folks, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Kristi Noem. I think it's going to be very important who Donald Trump picks as his VP. I know a lot of people out there in MAGA world would like to see someone that just kind of lowers their head and doesn't have aspirations at all for 2028. But I don't think that'll be the case. Whoever it is will be in the driver's seat for 2028. So I think that VP pick is going to be pretty important.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, because this is a very unique situation with former President Trump only being able to do one term. So you really do have to put that forethought into, okay, this person is most likely going to be the incumbent, essentially.
No doubt.
It's a unique situation. You really have to put an extra emphasis on that. So on that front, has anything changed since we last talked, when we were kind of banting about the different vice presidential possibilities for Trump? Noam was out there. Tim Scott's name was out there. Has that kind of stood pat, or what are we looking at?
No, it really has. I mean, I think you're looking, I mean, my analysis of it, and I know some of these principals, these players, I know them personally, but also obviously professionally. I think Kristi Noem is right there at the top of the list. If you're gonna kind of tell me, or you're gonna ask me, who do I think it's going to be? I think it's going to be Kristi Noem. I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a potential as well. Tim Scott is there too. I think they're all on that short list. And also just be look out. This is going to be an interesting one. Ben Carson. Folks are talking about Ben Carson. Look, he's the chamomile tea of politics. Not the most charismatic guy in the world. I got it. But he's a guy that Trump trusts, and a guy that's going to bury his head and do the job. So watch out for Ben Carson as to be kind of an interesting wild card in all of this. So we'll see.
It is very interesting. And I do recall former President Trump speaking positively about Carson often in public. So quick update here on Vermont, because this was the one state, David, we were looking at that maybe Nikki Haley would pull off a victory. And right now we've got 26% of the vote in, according to AP.
Yeah.
And Trump has a nearly 4-point lead at 50.2% to 46.3%. So obviously still a lot of votes out there left to be had, but Trump with the lead there as well, even though she spent a lot of time there, and that was a place that maybe some thought she had a shot.
And if we go to Texas, I know there were questions about Texas earlier. Not been called yet. At least AP hasn't called it yet, but Trump dominating there with about 22% of the vote in. Donald Trump up, what is it, about 74% to 20? Yep. I can't read
74-20.
Sorry, you get the shot of my bald head. How's that for YouTube? There you go. 20%. And then my understanding is, I'm not sure if AP is called, let me double check, Tennessee and Oklahoma. It is in red, which would suggest that they have called Tennessee and Oklahoma. And those would be no-brainers anyhow. I mean, Nikki Haley has no shot in either one of them. The evangelical vote, interesting tonight, if we can talk a little bit about that. I can go through some of the exit polls, but I'll just be very brief. Look, let me just be very clear about evangelicals. And if the Trump campaign is listening to this, they should understand this well and clear. Donald Trump doesn't even sniff the White House in 2016 or in 2024 without the support of white evangelical Christians. That is 100% proven statistically. And we're seeing it again tonight in Virginia. And if I can just go and quickly pull up some evangelical numbers here, here it is. But and once again, in Virginia, it's not going to be as much as North Carolina. And I just want to, if I can, I've got so many stats here real quick. Sorry about that. Here it is, Virginia. So in Virginia, the evangelical vote was 50%, 52%, excuse me. Let me go to North Carolina. My bad. North Carolina, 52% of the vote in North Carolina was white, born again, evangelical Christian. Trump won 81% of that vote. So 52% of the voters were white, born again, evangelical Christians. Trump won 81%. Trump also, by the way, won the other folks that were not born again or evangelical. And then in Virginia, Trump won 76% of the evangelical vote there. It was a smaller portion of the electorate, but Trump won that as well. So he wins everywhere with the evangelicals. He says the evangelicals love him, and that has been the case for a very long time now.
Well, and it's interesting because then, of course, Christians often get then criticized for saying, well, you're supporting all of whatever shortcomings Trump has personally. Like you're attaching yourself to those, and how could you possibly do that? And I mean, here's my working theory, David. I want your reaction to this. I mean, I think when you see what's happening in culture and you see the extremes that are happening, the parents having to go to these school boards and say, hey, can we not have pornography in our school library? That's all I'm asking for. I just stick to some math. I think maybe there's a big underestimating going on where they're saying, well, these Christians just love Trump. It's like, well, there's also a lot of crazy stuff going on. And I think people are willing to just say, whatever can get that out of there. I mean, whether that's Biden's fault or not, I'm just saying like that's how people are going to, you're in there, the buck stops here. Right. So if they perceive that to be a problem with the status quo, they're going to vote against that. So what do you make of that as far as the other factors going on in culture right now that are leading people into Trump's camp?
Well, I 100% agree with that, Dan. I'll take it a step further. I believe that evangelicals are so fed up with what they see in the culture. What is a man? What is a woman? All of the pronouns. And I can go down the list and what they're teaching these our kids in public education and the filth that you can find at your local, not just library, but your school library. You put it all together, and along comes Donald Trump, who says, well, I won't say it like him, but he has a few choice words to say about this. And not only that, but he's a man of action. And he's frustrated, but not only that, he's a doer. And he has got a chip on his shoulder. Actually, let me correct that. He's got a boulder on his shoulder. And the truth of the matter is that he specifically is going to go ahead and fight fire with fire. And I think evangelicals want to see someone bold stand up to the bullies that have been pushing around evangelicals and this culture writ large for a very long time. And this is not the time for any sort of bipartisan, think group on Capitol Hill to get to the bottom of the culture wars or another press conference or some niceties. They don't want niceties right now. They want someone to fight. And Donald Trump is a culture warrior fighter for them. And they're sick and tired of it. So I think because the culture has gotten so out of control that they want someone to match that energy. And Donald Trump has the energy. And I think that's a big part of it, Dan. And there's so much more to unpack.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's a fair assessment because if you think about it, you have a lot of secular worldly forces sort of really putting a finger in your chest and saying, you better go along with this. You better go along with this. And I think from a lot of Christians' viewpoint, they said they're like feeling like they're on eggshells. They can't say anything. Then the minute they say offer up a prayer or something, it's like, be quiet with your thoughts and prayers. We don't need those now. I mean, we hear that during the gun control debate. So when you have that dynamic going on, it's like, hey, wait a minute. Everybody else is allowed to go around and, advocate for whatever view that they want or whatever worldview they want to push. But then the minute we do, we get shoved down and we have to say, you have to be quiet about that. You can't talk. And so to your point about then Trump tries to give them a voice, a lot of people that probably resonates with.
You're absolutely right, Dan. And this is the Dr. Phil portion of the YouTube broadcast where we talk about the psychology of this. Look, here's the truth of the matter. Every day on legacy media, the liberal media, call them whatever you want, the mainstream media, every day we hear about Christian nationalism. And if you support Donald Trump and you're white and you're a Christian and you believe your rights come from God, not government, and you want to bring this country back to its Judeo-Christian founding, you are a Christian nationalist. And evangelicals say that's a bunch of bunk. That's a bunch of bunk. I'm not a Christian. Because why? Because the media wants you to believe Christian nationalists are ready to take over, in essence, the country by, armed rebellion or something like that, and they want to make they want to have every Christian, tens of millions of Christians are all the ones that showed up on January 6th at the Capitol, which is also a bunch of bunk. But they're trying to do that. So here's how it relates to Trump. When the media does that to evangelical Christians, they're doing the same thing to Donald Trump. They are beating up on him relentlessly. And that is the kumbaya moment where evangelicals go, you know what? Trump is getting beat up by the same people that are beating us up, and they don't like it. And so that's why they bond with Trump. It's kind of like one for all for one, the Three Musketeers type of situation. And they all kind of have a kumbaya moment. I really believe, Dan, that is kind of the Dr. Phil psychological DNA of what's going on here.
All right. If you're just joining us, you're watching CBN's live coverage of Super Tuesday. We've got results coming in still. We've got a few states that have been called. Virginia has been called for Donald Trump so far. I mean, about 3/4 of the vote in. He's got 66%. A lot of these big margins of victory. You have North Carolina, 74% for Trump there. That one's called as well. So looks like Oklahoma is called now. Even that's very early. That was 80-17 so far. That's just 8% in, and they called that thing. So you have
Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't hovering over Tennessee. Yep. There it is. Yep. Called 76% for Trump. So what we expected. This is not surprising, but nevertheless, it is, again, looking like a big night for the former president. And as we've been talking about, we're kind of looking forward to seeing how things shift from here on out. Nikki Haley likely going to call it a day here on the campaign in the next probably 24 to 48 hours, unless there was a big surprise and she wanted to keep going. Again, we didn't see really the path last time when we talked, David, but really no path now. So, I mean, it's probably time. But again, she has said that she is not going to be speaking tonight. She's watching the results come in from South Carolina with her team there. And Trump will be speaking. We don't know exactly when yet, but we are monitoring that. So if he does take to the stage while we are here chatting, there's a live look at Trump's headquarters there for the night for Super Tuesday. And again, if he hits the stage, we will take you right to that. So, David, one other thing I wanted to ask you here, and again, don't forget to leave your questions in the chat. We've gotten to a few of those, but I'd love to get to more of those if you have them. Just write question in big caps. I have a hard time. I'm getting older. I have a hard time seeing the letters sometimes. The question in big caps, we'll see it. They're rolling by pretty quick there. So we'll try to get those questions. But David, I wanted to ask you: are we seeing anything tonight that maybe gives us any indication, any foreshadowing, any sort of hint as to what's going to happen sort of in the House races or these other races that are coming up this year? Do we see anything on that front? Any trends, or is it still too soon?
No, it's still too soon. We're waiting on what's going to happen in California. That's a jungle primary out there. That's always an interesting one. We can get to that in a moment. Someone had asked earlier about Texas, and of course, it makes me think of Ted Cruz, who will be up running again for U.S. Senate. And tonight, we're going to find out who the Democrat will be running up against him. So we'll have to look to see if we have those statistics. We'll try to find those, and also. One other interesting race, of course, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, who's running for governor, Mark Robinson. He's been a flashpoint. The Democrats, the liberals can't stand him because he's spoken out against homosexual behavior and X, Y, and Z. And so he's going to win in a landslide tonight to be the Republican challenger there in North Carolina. So those are some of the races I'm watching. There's other ones as well. I do want to mention that Maine has been called for Donald Trump as well. It looks like so there's that, and we've been keeping our eye on Vermont. That might be the one state where Nikki Haley could actually potentially win. They have not called that yet. Remember, the polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern. That, at least as of a couple of minutes ago, was 49-47. What is it?
It just updated as I was sitting here watching it while you were saying that, and it's neck and neck right now. Virtually a dead heat. It's 20,000 votes in, and it's within just 50 votes. So they're neck and neck. Yeah. Actually, Haley is slightly ahead. But still 65% of the vote to go, but by far her best state.
Yeah. So, knock yourself out, Nikki Haley. You're going to win Washington, D.C. and Vermont. Bernie Sanders salutes you. I mean, come on. So there's not much going on there. But, hey, moral victory, I guess. Look, one other exit poll, Dan, here, which is interesting. And once again, we saw this in Iowa and New Hampshire, and we've seen it, and we saw it all over the country. Here it is again tonight, and I'll read you the stat, and you'll know it well. The question was asked, do you think Biden legitimately won the election in 2020? And you know, Dan, what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. The answer, according to Virginia voters, North Carolina voters, is no. 46% to 45%, but still 46% of Virginia voters say no. Biden did not win that election in 2020 legitimately. That's a majority. A majority. That it's 46 to 45%. So more voters in Virginia thought Biden did not win the election legitimately. And then in North Carolina, the number is even bigger. 60% of Republican voters saying no, Biden did not win the election legitimately. And that kind of goes to what we've been saying all along on our YouTube coverage, Dan, which is that it's something I've been calling the do-over election. Ron DeSantis misread the electorate. Nikki Haley misread it. Everybody that got in, Mike Pence, everybody misread the electorate. The Republican Party writ large, and I got it. There's X% that can't stand Donald Trump. They're the Nikki Haley folks. I got it. It's 18 to 20% of the Republican Party. But writ large, the Republican Party believes that Donald Trump got gypped in 2020. They want him to rectify what happened, and they are on his side. And we see that, once again, that's not my analysis. That is what the polling suggests or says, and we're just reporting it. Truth matters. Yeah. So that's what's going on. Whether you like it or not, that's what's happening in America.
Well, I think one thing, this is interesting, David, especially for elections going forward, because people are frustrated about that. I think the biggest reason is the early voting, right? You have Democrats very organized going out and essentially harvesting these votes, going to, and nobody knows what's actually happening there, right? Like, what happens in these interactions when you come up to a homeless person on the street and you get their name and you get their ballot? Like, the people don't trust that. So that all those rules were ushered in after COVID, right? These were rules that were taken advantage of at the time, that these operatives took advantage of the conditions on the ground in the country to say, hey, we need to get all this early voting going. Trump played that by casting aspersions on that process, which led to a lot of Republicans not trusting it, and so they didn't do it. And that led to a tactical advantage for Democrats. So, but going forward now, those rules are still there. They haven't disappeared. You can still cast your vote early in these, and they can still harvest, and they can still use all of their tools that they have, and the organizational tools at their disposal to harvest these votes. Yeah. Are Republicans combating that on the ground and saying, hey, like, we're not going to just let them do that. We're going to go out there and we're going to also canvass for votes and try to get more votes that way? Or are they still doing it the same way they did last time? And why would we expect a different result if these are still the rules?
Well, Dan, you're asking a $64,000 question. Now, on paper, in statements, Republicans will say, we're doing a good job. We're serious about early voting this time. Yeah, okay, the proof is in the pudding. We'll see. That is an unanswered question. They lose every single time in early voting. And I was talking to a pollster. I can't name the pollster. That pollster wouldn't want me to name them, but it's a how do I say this? A noteworthy pollster, someone that's very accurate. And he said, look, this is how it could go sideways for Trump in 2024 in the general election, is that the early voting becomes a real problem for Republicans. They have not figured that out as well as Democrats. Democrats are really, really good at it. And so, Dan, you're making a great point. Early voting is key for the Republicans if Donald Trump is going to win back the White House. Democrats are better at it. So that's one way. By the way, speaking about going sideways, this pollster said a couple of other things to me that were interesting because I asked the question. So I said, look, Donald Trump's been winning every national election poll against Biden in the last 4 to 6 months. He's up by 2, 3, 4, 6 points, depending on what it is. I said, so how does this go sideways for Trump? He said, well, one way is early voting. There are two other ways, world events. You never know about what's going to happen there. And the other way is that Trump says something, let's be honest. How do I say this? Well, I'm from New York, stupid. I mean, he says something, that's just off brand, off message. Now, he always says something that's, not stupid, but he always says stuff that's well, how do I say it? Maybe not as they would draw up in the GOP playbook, but that's not what this guy's talking about. We're specifically saying stuff where, he just says things that will crater his campaign for people that he needs, like independents or women in the suburbs, that type of stuff. So
yeah,
those are ways that it can go sideways for Trump. But right now, I want to be clear about something. A lot of people will say, they'll look at the polls and they'll go, okay, well, Trump's been up in a couple of polls. It's only a couple of polls, and who cares about the polls? Here's the problem with that thinking. Donald Trump was never beating Joe Biden, never beat Joe Biden in one poll in 2020. Didn't beat him in one poll. He's beating him now in every poll nationally for the last, like I said, 4 to 6 months. So there's a big difference between 2020 and 2024.
Yeah, definitely. David, talk about the enthusiasm going into this general election. We're assuming it's going to be Trump versus Biden again. And it looks like Trump may be doing better with GOP voters than Biden is doing with his voters. I mean, we've talked about the mental health issues. Can you expand on that a little bit about the enthusiasm, right? I mean, we see the Trump crowds, is Biden going to be able to overcome that on his side of things from his perspective, where the excitement just doesn't seem to be there? You got a lot of trepidation there from Democrats who are just wondering maybe this isn't a good idea, just seeing the age and seeing the just sort of the issues he's having with his health. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because enthusiasm is everything. It's all about getting your people to the polls. And on the Trump side, he's got a MAGA base, as we know. That's about a third of the party, about 35%. I mean, they are all in. We've talked about the Nikki Haley kind of contingent, 15, 20% or so. That's something I'll have to work on. Some of them will come back. But then there's the Joe Biden side of the ledger. And the enthusiasm is way down. And once again, not my analysis, going back to facts. Let's go through the facts. This New York Times Siena poll, and this has been pretty consistent. Donald Trump, I know, get ready for the smelling salts, Stan. If there are liberals out there watching, Donald Trump beating Joe Biden among Hispanics. This is a New York Times Siena poll, 46% to 40% among Hispanics. Why is that exactly? Well, there are many Hispanics here, obviously, that have come through the legal way into this country, and they see folks coming in the illegal way and say, no. I worked my you-know-what off to get here legally, and now you're going to do this? No, that's not going to fly. And so they like that Trump wants to crack down on illegal immigration. That, I think, is part of the reason you're seeing that. The other thing is that Joe Biden has a black vote problem. The truth of the matter is, in that New York Times Siena poll, Donald Trump was getting, ready for this, Dan, 23% of the black vote. Donald Trump got 8% of the black vote in 2020, 8%. He's now polling at about 23%. No one expects that to be his final number. It'll probably be less than that. But even if it's 12, 13, 14%, that's game, set, match. The Democrats must rely, Biden has to rely on the black vote in the many in the inner cities and elsewhere, obviously, to win. And if Trump is eating into that, it's a big problem. So you just go across the board, and it's problem after problem for Joe Biden from an enthusiasm standpoint.
Yeah, and then you also have, what kind of impact do you think the protest vote on the Democrat side, like from the pro-Gaza types who don't think he's being pro-Gaza enough, don't think he's being harsh enough on Israel and calling for genocide? We saw, like we said, AOC getting accosted there at the movie theater, from that type of person who's frustrated at Democrats from their point of view, not speaking out harshly enough against Israel. Is that also a threat to, or is that more of a media thing that we're sort of seeing in the headlines?
No, I think that's legitimate. We saw the uncommitted vote you're talking about in Michigan. And the reason I'm looking down, and once again, you're getting the nice shot of my scalp, is because this was the case in many states, uncommitted. I'm looking at the uncommitted vote on the Democrat side tonight. And look at North Carolina. Joe Biden won 90% of the vote. I mean, that, once again, he's not running against anybody. Okay, Marianne Williamson and her crystal ball and, her costumes. And then there's Dean Phillips. But anyhow, they're not getting any traction. But look at, in North Carolina, Biden got 90%. But look at this. no preference, in other words, uncommitted, 10%. So 10% of the vote voted, literally 26,000 people in North Carolina, Democrats, voted no preference rather than Joe Biden. So these are the type of things, and I'm going down, let's see, in Arkansas, well, it was a little less. Yeah, in certain states, they didn't actually have, well, here we go. Oh, look at this. In Massachusetts, get a load of this. Well, this is only about 2% of the votes in. All right, well, they already have a lot of votes coming in. There's no preference in Massachusetts as well on the Democrat side. So this is going to be an issue for Biden, people registering their complaints. So Biden is kind of hemorrhaging on all different sides, from the far left, from the African-American vote, from the Hispanic vote. We haven't even talked about the Gen Z vote. Donald Trump actually beat, this is an NBC poll. NBC, not a friend of Donald Trump who skews polls from a Democrat perspective. Gen Z, Donald Trump beating Joe Biden among Gen Z. What is that, 18 to 34? Am I correct on that? 18 to 34, Gen Z. Joe Biden won Gen Z in 2020 by 20 points. He's now losing to Donald Trump. Look, this is bad, Dan. This is bad for Biden all around. So to be clear, even if the Nikki Haley vote that we hear so much about, which is once again less than 40%, but that Nikki Haley Republican vote that is very anti-Trump, even if many of them stayed home and didn't vote for Trump, that's one problem for Trump compared to about 7 to 8 problems for Biden on the other side of the ledger. So either way, it might hurt Donald Trump a little bit, but not, I mean, Biden's going to get hurt a whole lot more in a lot of different ways.
You know, the indictments against Trump right now in the court cases, clearly that has galvanized Trump supporters and Republicans, many of them to his side, to his support. They don't view these cases, a lot of them, as legitimate. So that's how it's played out in the primary. Now, then we turn to the general. Does that have the same impact? What does that do? Because, you know, we watch the Electoral College, and the way it's structured right now and the way it is, it just, a Republican candidate has just they have very little margin for error. You know, you're already starting off as a Democrat. You've got New York, you've got California. So you really have to run the table on a lot of these swing states, you know, if you're the Republican nominee to get this. So back to the indictments. How does that play in the general? And what does that do to some of these important swing states like the Pennsylvanias of the world that are likely going to come down to the wire, regardless of, you know, I think these polls that Trump seems to be doing well, and it's still going to be close in a lot of these states. He's not going to run away with Pennsylvania, right? So how does that play out?
Oh, that's a great question, Dan. Look, this is what Democrats are banking on. They're hoping for not only, obviously, they got the indictments. They're hoping for some sort of conviction before 2024 of November 2024. And they hope that takes down Donald Trump's poll numbers in some of these key swing states. I'm not convinced. Some data will suggest that Trump's numbers they are not as good, for sure, if he gets convicted. And then there's been some other polls that say people are going to vote for him no matter what. As a matter of fact, we saw some of that in North Carolina and Virginia tonight. So I think the jury is still out as to whether or not that's even going to help Democrats. But let's just say it does. Either way, it's going to come down to, I mean, we know the states that it's going to come down to, right? But look, I think ultimately this election is going to be decided by Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, those 3 Rust Belt states. Those are going to be the key. If Trump wins 2 of 3, if he wins all 3, it's over. If he wins 2 out of 3, most likely it's over, as long as they keep Georgia. So we'll see. And Georgia's, of course, a crapshoot. Let me just quickly update you guys on Texas, the Senate race there. Ted Cruz, of course, is going to be the Republican nominee for Senate. The question is, who's the Democrat going to be? It looks like Colin Allred is going to be the Democrat. He's a former football player. He's got about 68% of the vote, and about 40% of the vote is in. So it looks like he's going to be the nominee there on the Democrat side. We're also looking into California. That's not quite in yet, but we can talk about that maybe tomorrow, some other time. That's a kind of a confusing situation. It's a jungle primary. And if I start to explain it, I'll be honest with you, my head's going to explode. So I don't think I'm going to do it. But DM me. If you want the answer, I'll explain it to you on a DM. Go ahead and DM me.
Watching the chat here, interesting question came in. I'm not sure what the answer is this. I'll let you tackle this one.
Oh, thanks,
David,
Dan. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm just going to hand this one all the time right over to you. But Holly asks, what can a Christian voter do in a hopelessly blue state, assuming she's a Republican, given the phrasing of that question? Well, what can a Christian voter do in a hopelessly blue state?
Mm-hmm. Holly, it's a great question. The answer is take care of your own bean patch. What is right out in front of you, in your front yard, your local school board, your PTA, you name it. All of the stuff we see at the national level, we talk about president, we talk about U.S. Senate and House and all these big bills and the transgender bills and the women's sports and all that stuff. It all germinates at the local level. It all starts at the local level. It is up to we, the people. And once again, I'm not taking a side here. I'm just saying whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, liberal, conservative, animal, vegetable, or mineral, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is it is about we, the people, and you've got to get active. You got to get involved in your community. God gave us free will. And that's the aspect that we're talking about here politically. We're not supposed to sit on our hands. We're supposed to be active and involved in our communities. Alexis de Tocqueville once talked about remember the French philosopher who came to America in the early 1800s. He loved America. What did he love about America? He said he loved the platoons. In other words, the communities is what he called them, the communities that were taking care of each other. And ultimately, that's what this is about. Ultimately, this is about federalism, if you will. In other words, not just at the state level, but the community level, the local level. Take care of what's right in front of you. Don't get so, what's the word I'm looking for? Once again, it might be more than a two-syllable word. But once again, you make sure you're not getting overwhelmed. There it is, overwhelmed. See, 3 syllables.
You did it. Well done.
Oh, thank you. Overwhelmed with what's going on at the national level. Keep it local. That would be my suggestion.
All right. Just want to remind folks, you can check out, you can watch, we're looking at this, the results as they come in. You guys can poke right along with that too at cbnnews.com. We've got that in our election center there on the site. You can check that out and you can watch as the numbers come in. It's always fun stuff, and it's a little bit of a rout right now, but still, it's fun to watch the numbers come in and update. So we had a little bit of a side chat going on here in the YouTube chat, David.
Yes, sir.
And first things first, I have to address the user who brought it up. His name's Treasure Hunter Deals. All right. I just love that name, the username. I'm curious. I want to know what you're hunting. Is this one of those metal detectors on the beach? Are you an antique guy? Are you like the American Pickers and you're going around? So my brain starts spinning. So go ahead. You can tell me what you do in there or why you did that. Maybe I don't want to know. Maybe I'll regret asking that question. We'll find all that out later. But here's what they bring up.
Yes, sir.
In the general election, is there a possibility of a wild card sort of independent candidate coming along? The name that just springs to everyone's mind, I'm sure, and the chatters have pointed this out as well, RFK Jr. Does that have any impact on the race at all? Who would it harm? Who would it help?
Great question, Treasure Hunter, or whatever your name is exactly. The answer is yes, and we could devote a whole hour YouTube special to RFK, and I don't mean his policies. I'm talking about his impact, though we could talk about his policies as well. Yes, he's going to be a third-party candidate. He's on the ballot in quite a few states, obviously, and he's going to be a factor. He could get 13, 14, 15% of the vote. We don't know. It could be that high. The last time a third-party candidate got that much or got quite a significant size of the vote, I think we can all say the name together. We know Ross Perot back in the day. He got about 19%, 19.8%, almost 20%. It's the most a third-party candidate has ever received, at least in modern political history. So yes, RFK Jr. is going to be a factor. Remember when we talked about Joe Biden having all sorts of issues regarding enthusiasm? Oh, he's got the RFK Jr. issue as well. Leave it to JFK's nephew to go ahead and give Biden more problems. Yes, RFK Jr. is going to be a problem for Biden. So is Jill Stein. Jill Stein's going to be in the race. Remember, there are folks in Hillary's camp that are still lamenting the fact that Jill Stein took X amount of votes in certain key swing states from Hillary in 2016, and that cost Hillary the election, yada, 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 as Seinfeld said. But the point simply is that Yeah, there's going to be a lot of third-party candidates. And we haven't even talked. Oh, maybe we shouldn't talk about it. But anyhow, oh, gosh.
As well.
Let me just say this. I'll give you news of the day. Okay. Michelle Obama's office came out today and said no. Michelle Obama is not running for president. That is from her spokeswoman. Said Michelle Obama has no desire, does not want to be.
They all say that, though. They all say it.
I know. So I guess that means she's running. Just kidding.
She's running. She's running. There she goes.
Look, you take their word for it. They're politicians. They're telling the truth. Of course they are. Okay, never mind. I've got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn.
All right. Well, you know what? Look at this, David. As yes, I'm just about to wrap us up for the night, but then this question, people really want you to look deep into the looking glass and see what's going on in 2028. DMS is asking, will DeSantis run in 2028? And I mean, look, again, that depends on, as we talked about, what, well, I'll throw in my 2 cents here, David, then I'll let you go. But I mean, I think it depends on who's actually in the White House at that particular time. But I think especially if Trump serves another term and he can't, I mean, I think DeSantis is certainly a likely guy, but like we said, that VP is going to be a big time wild card there.
Yeah, I think DeSantis definitely wants to run again. I don't think there's a question about that. And yeah, I mean, look, there was some animosity there, quite a bit of it actually, but DeSantis did the right thing and got out right after Iowa, didn't even compete in New Hampshire, unlike Nikki Haley, who was basically just, what's the word, self-destructing before our very eyes in terms of any sort of chance at a Republican nomination. Having said that, she's hoping that the party changes directions in 2028. But as for DeSantis, he's banking on the fact that MAGA is not going anywhere. And he's right. I don't think MAGA is going anywhere. Remember, this is not, the media wants to tell you that this is all about Trump. And there's no doubt that Trump is a powerhouse. He's a force. He's a vessel. And he's politically incorrect and all of that, and that makes a difference. But the movement is bigger than Trump. The question is, who is the right vessel? And DeSantis has some of that in him. He's not Trump. There'll be no one like Trump for the next X amount of decades, maybe ever. But I do think DeSantis does want to run, and you can even probably see him as a potential leading front runner in 2028.
All right, David, it's about that time. We were waiting for Trump to speak. He didn't get there just yet, but they said potentially at 10 o'clock. So it's going to be a while, but potentially before he gets out there and actually addresses, because we're still waiting for a lot of numbers to come in. Like we've called most of the states we talked about. We went through Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, Oklahoma called, Alabama called, Texas is a blowout. Massachusetts called for Trump. Trump's back up in Vermont with 46%. He's back up by just a little bit. So we're seeing a lot of the results in, but there's still a lot coming out west, out of these 15 or so states, I believe it is, that are going to today. So you're still going to have a lot of numbers come in. He's likely just going to wait that out a little bit longer. So any final thoughts you want to leave us here? Your highlights for kind of what we know at this point in the evening on Super Tuesday, 2024.
Well, let's be honest, and I don't want to poo-poo our coverage because let's be honest, as I pat ourselves on the back, we're fantastic. Okay, Dan, let's be clear, but this is not Super Tuesday. This is Snoozer Tuesday. I mean, that's what this is. This has been a fait accompli for a very long time. And that's the most French you're ever going to hear me speak on the air. But that's it. It's been over for a very long time. And so tonight we have, right now at 9 o'clock Eastern, we have a few more polls closing here. And matter of fact, in 2 more minutes. But right now, 9 states, if I'm counting it correctly, 9 Super Tuesday states have already gone to Donald Trump. We're waiting on Vermont. We'll see about that. Here's the bottom line. This thing's over. Donald Trump will not clinch tonight. He will clinch on March 12th. He couldn't even clinch tonight if he won every single delegate tonight. He'll clinch March 12th, which will be in a week. Nikki Haley will be out of the race probably by noon Eastern tomorrow. That's the prediction here. And this is Donald Trump's GOP. It is not your grandfather's Republican Party. It is not Ronald Reagan's Republican Party anymore. This is not Reaganism anymore. This is Trumpism. More specifically, it's populism. And remember, it's very important that Donald Trump, Joe Biden called his economic plan Bidenomics. Trump the other day called his economic plan Maganomics. He didn't say Trumponomics. He called it Maganomics. It's very important for people to understand. And Rachel Maddow, if you're watching, and I'm guessing you're not, but if Rachel Maddow or any liberal is watching on the legacy media, you always want to make this about Trump. And believe me, Trump loves to hear that. Don't get me wrong. But the truth of the matter is, it's never been about Trump. It's been about we the people. It's been about MAGA. It started with the Tea Party. It's now through MAGA and Trump. And now we wait for the ... of what is next. But right now, we wait for 2024 and the general election. And Joe Biden is in a world of hurt going forward, Dan.
Well, and we will continue. I mean, we don't have, look, I think the suspense is all but gone if there was what was left of it here in the GOP primary. So we will be turning and obviously covering everything election 2024 here, heading all the way up to November. I got to give everyone an update here. For those of you who weren't in the chat, I pointed out that username Treasure Hunter Deals. This answer, I got an answer to what that name means, and it's better than I could have imagined that it would have been. Check this out. The name comes from, he's got a ministry called Treasure, which is named after Matthew 13. They raise money for other ministries selling secondhand donations. That's fantastic. That's great.
Oh, that's great. By the way, real quick, I just want to point out this just came in Texas now called. For
Texas called, okay.
Trump. So there you go. Colorado and Minnesota just closed. They're polling 9 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. out in the Mountain Time Zone, and 8 o'clock out in Minnesota. So we wait on those. But this is a clean sweep so far for Donald Trump. Maybe Vermont goes to Nikki Haley. We'll see. But it's not going to matter. So that's where we're at.
All right. Well, just once again, I want to thank everyone who's joined us, both on the CBN News Channel, on our app, on the CBN News app, on YouTube, in our chat. I've enjoyed going back and forth with y'all. Really appreciate you being here with us. Look forward to having you with us again. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. I think you can get it whenever we go live. We've got Chuck Holton, who's all around the world at different places. George Thomas going live frequently. And, of course, David and I and others will be covering all things election. We're going to be here Thursday nights. Make sure, mark it down in your calendars. We're going to be here Thursday night for the State of the Union. Yes. Watch it with us. You all can comment in here. We'll be commenting with you. It'll be a fun evening. So appreciate you all being here. David, appreciate you spending your time here on this Tuesday evening, on Super Tuesday.
You bet.
And just once again, thank you all for being here and watching. God bless. Have a fantastic rest of your evening.
See you, everybody.